COP26 is because of this emergency, climate emergency.
The promenade, the people walking, the people talking, people talking.
I had been a police officer for nearly 30 years, but every time we had a so-called success, it was actually counterproductive because it just increased the violence. The marketplace wasn't affected in the slightest, other than it got a boost for the criminals who were making money from it. I was part of for many years, and I now know that, and the police are still part of because of the war on drugs.
How do you think we can bring about that unpopular opinion among the public and make them learn the fact that decriminalization is actually needed?
Just tell the truth. If people would just tell the truth here, the political parties don't come into it. We don't believe that it's a political issue. We're calling all politicians to get round the table because there's a human approach to this. There's a common sense approach to this. And here in Scotland, we happen to have the highest death rate in Europe. Please, let's just take stock here after 50 years and go with the evidence. Because politicians are great at saying it has to be evidence-led when they want to put something off making a decision. Well, we've got all the evidence that's going here. We're police officers, we know about evidence, but we hate being taken for idiots, being misled, or being patronised in any way. All we want people to do is tell the truth. That's very much what Scottish people are like. They just like to hear it as it is. No matter how unpalatable, we just want to get the straight talking, harsh reality. And we demand it of our guests. And if we get it, we'll quickly embrace you as friends and pals for life sometimes. So fancy, catchy rhetoric, easily mouthed promises, and playing to the crowd is of no use here in Glasgow, especially at this time of climate emergency. It's why we're here. So what we need is action. Action from these world leaders and dignitaries that are descending in Scotland as we speak, from people who are capable of delivering those strategies and promises. Politicians are just in the way of truth because there's so much ideology going on. They would rather protect their position as a party, their position as an ideology, their position and their job, and go with the party policy that's outdated and not working, than tell people the truth. The COP26 does allow us to focus, because we always struggle to bring an urgency to it. The deaths on the streets of Scotland and Glasgow and across the world should do that, but it doesn't, because there's still a mentality, and I'll confess that I had this mentality years ago, that it's only drug users that are dying. So what COP26 hopefully does is allow us to focus on the urgency here. After 50 years, it's not a case of let's tinker around the edges here. Let's try decriminalising cannabis in this part of the country and see how it goes. We're past that stage now. We're looking at a global issue here that's destroying the very planet that we rely on.
What issues do you want to be seen talked about at COP26? And who do you want to be there to talk about it?
The decision makers are the money men, who we call organised crime, the cartels, the drug lords, basically the worst of society, the very worst of us, who are ruthless criminals, who think nothing of life. Life itself is not of value, never mind the planet. Profit and power are the only things that they care about. And we feed them by allowing them this marketplace that we created by prohibition and gave them control of it to do with as they please. The most unfortunate in our society, who then become victims of the war on drugs, of the dealers, and at street level fall victim because they need crutches to get through life at all. And this is provided by our criminals. We need to take control of that. And you touched on what we need is to decriminalise the drugs market. But that would be useless and pointless if we didn't regulate the drug market then. And we take control of the supply of drugs. And most importantly, at this moment in time, it's an emergency. When I was a police officer, when we went to an emergency, what do you think we did when we went to an emergency in our vehicles? What have we got on the top of the police vehicle? A blue light. I think it's the same in every country in the world, isn't it? And if we want to get there quickly, we use those or whatever version you want to use across the globe. But you want to get there in a hurry. Well, I keep hearing our politicians saying this is an emergency. The drugs situation, drug deaths in Scotland, it's an emergency. They're not doing anything palatable. And the COP26 is because of this emergency, climate emergency. I don't hear any blue lights. I don't hear any sirens. All I hear is rhetoric. And you can involve politicians, ex-police officers, ex-military, because you can pay them huge amounts of money to lend their name to your legitimate company. The truth of the matter is that just in the manufacture of it, there are horrific amounts of waste products created that have to be disposed of, and they are, because there's no regulations, there's nobody to oversee this process by its very nature, because it's criminal. This is not because there's bad men in the world. There will always be bad men and women. There'll always be criminals, but we can control that to a degree if we decide what's criminal and what's not. And what we did in 1971, what President Nixon did when he declared this war on drugs, had nothing to do with drugs at the time. It was about control. It was about control in America. Communism and all these things that you girls hardly hear about now were a big, big thing in the 60s in America. Because what we didn't realize that we were perpetuating the marketplace. And politicians understand this better than anyone. And I can't help thinking that we miss a trick here somewhere, girls. I'm going off script here a wee bit. But the rhetoric from the Conservatives in particular is always to come down hard on crime. That's their stance and always will be. We come down hard on crime. We give no quarter. More police, more laws. Lock them up, jail them, put them in prison. Educate the children not to use drugs. We had a campaign back in the 80s or something called Just Say No. Now, there was a big PR company hired to gauge how well that campaign was put together. And their conclusion was that if they had been asked to promote drugs to teenagers, they couldn't have done a better job than the government did. So what we need to do, I think, and I've not discussed this with anyone else in LEAP yet, it's only forming in my head, is come at it beside them and embrace their ideologies and make it palatable to them. That there's a way of doing this through the markets and through and that there's a lot of money for businesses. We could create a legal industry here. We can create jobs. We can create a whole industry. We could sell shares from the company that controls the drugs coming into the UK. We could make it a public limited company. The good thing is that the changes that we want to see, we all agree on. What the planet emergency has done, if there's anything positive to take from it, is that it's beginning to focus minds, regardless of background, regardless of geography or political leanings, regardless of anything. It's something that we all have in common, is that we need the planet Earth to live on. So that's the positive that lies underneath all of this. But, and I'll come back to the very start of our conversation, ladies, without the truth, without truth between us, we can't go anywhere because there's no trust. There's no, I've got a friend who used to be a police officer and he was an army soldier as well. He used to say to me, if somebody lies to you, you can't do any business with them. You can't do, there's nothing you can do because you can't trust them. So you're as well to walk away. There's no point in getting involved and hoping that he'll change or hoping it's just a wee white lie and that it'll be the last one, because it's your whole relationship has just been undermined and it might never be the same. And in this state of emergency, that's never been truer. So the only thing we really need to start with, the basic thing we need to start with and not lose sight of and be brave enough to bring it onto the table is the truth.